Corpses pose in curious ways. One might say it gives them character, a somber tableau of their final moments. She considered this as she loomed above one of them, arms and legs sprawled, neck bent askew, ribs crushed by the weight of the beast that killed him. And he was one of the cleaner ones. Half of her wanted to pull the body straight, perhaps even brush its eyes closed and bury it with some dignity. The other half cared little to dirty her hands to make some corpses prettier. Such grisly deaths had they suffered. And the stench. When men were slain by men, it made for a terrible sight. When men were slain by beast, a terrible smell as well. The woods reeked of it, the smell of people's insides steaming off the frosty cold grass. It hardly helped that half of them shat themselves before dying. What a dreadful morning this has been. The cawing interrupted her thoughts. They loomed above her hungrily, perched on the branches in their small group. She needn't look their way to know the call of crows, a guttural and noisy cry that always followed soon after slaughter. She watched them, amused. Impatient little shits, she said. Couldn't even wait for the bodies to cool. Not too far off, a pair had already begun at the innards of one poor bloke who'd lost everything south of his ribs in the slaughter. Best let them feast, thought the traveller. There were others scattered about the woods, enough to keep them fed through autumn and winter. Better them than her to clean the beast's mess. No sooner had she left the corpse than the carrion eaters descended upon it. It reminded her that she had yet to have breakfast. She'd have to find a spot far enough from the wretched stench of butchery before she could make a fire, of course. Then a short hunt after that. I'm sure there was some fowl somewhere around. Wait! A croaking voice. No louder than a whisper, still loud enough to give her pause. Please, wait! A corpse was speaking to her. She approached, stopping just close enough to discern it wasn't quite a corpse just yet. Help me. She knelt beside him. He lay soaked in sweat and blood. It was a strange contrast, the icy breaths mingling with his feverish panting. Wish I could help, she said, but there's little I can do with what remains of you. The dying man reached out a bloodied half hand, most of the palm and the last 2 fingers missing. What he was reaching for, she could not say. She remained still, a few inches from his touch. Please, he muttered. Dead men rarely saddened her, but dying men were another matter. What a waste of lives. Whoever these men were, they had only died because they got in her way. And here lay the last survivor, pleading for this traveler to stitch him back together again. It was too familiar a sight. She bit her lip, trying desperately not to feel. To her luck, she did not have to. A distant shout. Footsteps. Human footsteps. More men were approaching from the north. The traveler regarded the dead around her and considered. I suppose they had to come from somewhere. Some of them were hunters. Their bows suggested as much, though they must have been shit at the job, for not a single arrow was in the beast's pelt, other than those fired by her. Regardless, if there were hunters in these woods and more approaching, there must have been a town nearby. Help is coming, she said before rising again and whistling for her mare. She arrived just as the men came into view, townsfolk with a frightened look to them. She couldn't say what frightened them more, the scattered corpses, the beast that made them, or the girl in the bright red riding hood that made a corpse of the beast itself. They gathered the fallen and the wounded regardless, some tying up the beast itself and dragging it along with them. All the while the traveler turned her gaze back to the crows, who had returned to their branches, disappointed. Don't worry, she said to them in a language no human remembered. There will be plenty for you to feast upon in the days to come. The Untold Tales, Book 1. Hour of the Wolf. Written by A.J. Gallows.